Now, Neraval is an aspect of Manodharma that brings raga, tala and sahitya together. That is melody, rhythm and text, the text of the song. So, improvisation involves all three in Neraval. Neraval is a Tamil word. Neravarada means to fill. In Neraval, what happens is that one line of the composition, typically it is a kriti, any one line of the kriti is taken and there is improvisation of that line, and there is a certain way of building up that improvisation. I will demonstrate. Now, the line selected obviously has to be appropriate in various ways. First, that the word should not be very difficult to pronounce. Some of our kritis do have difficult words. So, a line containing a particularly difficult word is essential. We usually avoid that in Neraval. So, how do we pick the line for Neraval? That is itself something that has some thought behind it. But for most big great compositions, the Neraval line is more or less established. Though of course, there is nothing to say that some other line from that kriti cannot be picked for Neraval, but by and large most people would do Neraval on one line of the kriti that has already been attempted earlier. So, this is a composition of Tyagaraja in Maya Malavagola, Rupaka Talam. It is a very simple talam. So, here Tyagaraja is talking about doing puja to Rama, and this line, Charanam line, this is Sadasirukha Punaga Champaka Patala Kuravagaya Sadasirukha. So, here it is, these are just names of flowers which he is offering in worship to Rama. So, it is a good line to take up for Neraval. Sarasirukha Punaga Champaka Patala Kuravagaya Sarasirukha Punaga. This is a Sangati. This is established, this is already there, this is part of the composition, a melodic variation that is part of the composition as taught. Sadasirukha Punaga. This is the first Sangati. Then Sadasirukha Punaga Champaka Patala Kuravagaya 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 Sadasirukha Punaga Champaka Kuravaga Sadasiruga Punnaga. So, using the line, the words in that particular distribution itself. So, it is Sadasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga. So, just using those same words, that same line in the setting more or less with the same setting, there is improvisation. Sarasiruga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga. So, the Neraval begins in the first speed. So, Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga. So, this is what is called the first speed or Kurikala Neraval. Then Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga. And then it can go through the Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga 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 Punnaga. So, this is the way the Neraval is expected to be built up. Now, one of the most important things here to be maintained is what is the Eduppu. So, here the song, the line begins at Arayadam, half. Sarasiruga, half into the first beat. No, that has to be maintained. Sarasiruga, and also the overall distribution of the words through, there are 4 avartanas here in this line. The words have to more or less be in those places. So, Sarasiruga Punnaga Champaka Patala Kuravaga Sarasiruga. So, the Sarasiruga, the Eduppu has to be maintained every time. That is the very important technical consideration in the presentation. The next aspect of Manodharma is what is called Swaraprastara or Kalpanaswaram, in which the solfa syllables, the swaras themselves are uttered and improvisation happens using them. And this also is attached to the anchor for this is a line in the composition. Now, if a particular line has been picked up for Neraval, usually Swaraprastara is done with the same line as anchor. Now, to demonstrate with the same line. Sadasi Rukha Unnaga Padapa Magari Sarigama Sadasi Rukha. This is a very simple one avartana swara. Sometimes if it is a bigger composition, we do also first speed, lower speed Swaraprastara. Sadasi Rukha Pamagari Gama Sadasi Rukha Gada Pamagari Gama Sadasi Rukha Manida Pamagari Sadi Gama Sadasi Gama Padani Sari Sanida Pamagasari Gama Sadasi Ruga. So this is called Kurkala Swaram, and we usually go from shorter swara sequences to longer sequences, always maintaining the edupu. So here Sadasi Ruga, that is at Panchapada Pa Pa Ma Pa Ma Pada Pa Pa Sadasi Ruha. So the swara sequences have to end either at Ma or at Dha. Pa Ma Gari Gama Sadasi. You can't say Pada Pa Ma Gari Sadi Sadasi. That is seen as very shoddy. You can't do that. It has to lead seamlessly into the edupu. Pada Pa Ma Ga Ma Da Sadasi Ruha. This is okay, acceptable. In some contexts, going to the higher note sounds good actually. In some contexts, it won't, not necessary. Pa Ma Ga Re Sa Sadasi Ruha. This is okay. Pa Ma Ga Re Sa Sadasi Ruha. Gama Padani Sa Ida Pama Gama Sadasi Pada Pama Pama Gari Sari Gama Sadasi Gama Ga Pama Da Pani Da Pada Ma Pama Gama Sadasi Gama Padani Sari Sari Da Pama Gari Gama Sadasi Sari Sari Sadani Pada Ma Pama Gama Sadasi Risa Gari Maga Pama Da Pani Da Sani Risani Da Pama Gari Gama Sadasi. So this kind of small patterns also are created all the time. Pada Pama Pada Pama Da Pama Da Pama Pama Gama Gari Sani Gama Sadasi. Here there is just dense clustering around Panchama. Pada da pada pada ma ba ma da da pada da pada ma pada pada pa ma pa ma da pada pa ma ga ma sadasi. Ga ma pa ma pada pada ma pa ma ga re ga ma sadasi. These are small patterns created, all spontaneously created. Typically when you end a Swaraprastara, quite often you find a big pattern, slightly complex pattern. Now if you look at this pattern, Pada Pa Ma Gari Sari Gama Pada Ni Sari Ni Sari Gari Sani Da Ni Sani Da Pa Sani Da Pa Ma Sadasi. This is a very simple pattern. This is what is called a korvai. A korvai is a rhythmic pattern of considerable complexity. It can get very, very complex actually. And what I just sang is a very simple pattern. This is 5 into 3. Gari sani da re sani da pa sani da pa ma. 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. And you know exactly how many beats this pattern will take. This set of 3 will take, and so you accordingly you adjust the place where you pick this pattern up from. In this case, pa ma ga re ga ma pa da ni ga ri sa ni da ri sa ni da pa sa ni da pa ma sa da si ru ga. it's a pattern. When you repeat it thrice, it's 15 aksharas. So here the edupu is 2 into the first beat. So if you do the math, the place where you have to pick up this pattern of 5 into 3 would be 3/4 into the last beat. That is 1, 2, 3. This, as I said, is a very basic, elementary pattern. There can be much more complex patterns, and this is called a korve. Each pattern can run to 60 beats or 120 beats, and that will be repeated thrice. So korves can get very complex, and they add a kind of rounding off, a finale to the entire performance. But there are many musicians who completely who have a very reduced use for korves. Because korve is something that you learn, you practice, and you deliver. There are some very rare musicians who can even create korves on the spur of the moment, but by and large most musicians, if they want to perform a korve, it is something they have practiced and they have to deliver on stage. So again, Swaraprastara is different from Chittaswaram. Chittaswaram, as I have mentioned before, is part of the Kriti itself. This just as Sangati is part of the Kriti, but Neraval is improvisation using a line of the Kriti. So also Chittaswaram is part of the composition, whereas Swaraprastara is improvised. It's possible to make it out. For instance, in this there are some very famous Chittaswarams. Niravadhi sukhada nirmala rupa, niravadhi sukhada nirmala rupa, nirjita munishapa, niravadhi sukhada. Sharadivadana natasakradana, Sharadivadana natasakradana, Sharadivadana natasakradana, Shankaradigeya manasadu manasu sadana, Sharadivadana natasakradana, Shankaradigeya manasadu manasu sadana. Sa re ga ma ni da ni ma da ma ga ri sa da sa re ga ma da sa sa da ni ni da ma ga ri sa da ma ga ri sa ri 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 da ma ga ri sa ni da ma da sa ri sa ni da sa sa da ni ni ma da da ma ga ri sa re ga ma ni da ni ma da ma ga ri sa re ga ma da sa ni da sa re ga ma ga ri sa ni da sa ri sa ni da ma ga ri sa ni da niravadhi sukhada. Now this is a Chittaswaram and it's part of the composition. Quite often Chittaswarams are composed by later musicians, not necessarily by the composer, the Vagyekara himself, but then these are some famous Chittaswarams that are part of some compositions. The Chittaswaram is sung after the Anupallavi and then it goes back to the Pallavi. The Chittaswaram is again sung after the Charanam and that leads into the Pallavi. That is how the Chittaswaram occurs in compositions. Now the Charanam of this composition is Mamava Maragada Manini Bhade Mamava Maragada. And this is a famous line for taking up Swaraprastara, because Mamava Maragada. So the Mamava Maragata is actually what is called a Swarakshara. The Swara and the Akshara are the same. It is Ma. The word is also Ma. Mamava Maragada Madini Bhadegaya Mamava Maragada Danida Madamaga Magari Sariga Mamava Maragada. The Edupu is 3 into the first beat. Mama va ma ra ga da. Da sa ni da ma ga ri sa ri ga ma va ma ra ga da. Da da ni da ma ga re ga ma va ma ra ga da. Re ga ma ga re ga ma ga ri sa ri ga ma va ma ra ga da.